Have you ever wondered, what price do people pay chasing the promise of the American dream? Now imagine leaving behind everything: your family, your culture, your language, and stepping into a land where your very existence is seen as a threat. This is not just the story of immigrants. This is the forgotten story of Chinese immigration to America, a chapter so deeply buried that even history books whisper about it. But here's the shocking part. These weren't just workers building railroads or washing clothes in small towns. Behind the walls of Chinatown, there were secret societies, forbidden rituals, coded messages, and even love stories that could cost you your life. Men disappeared without a trace. Entire families lived under fake names. And the government, yes, the same one that promised freedom and equality, created laws to erase their very existence. In the mid-1800s, thousands of Chinese laborers landed on American shores, chasing gold and opportunity. They built the railroads. They carved paths through mountains. They connected oceans. But while they built America's backbone, America was building walls around them, invisible walls of hate, fear, and exclusion. And yet, what survived through all of this was something more powerful than politics or prejudice. A secret culture of resistance, a hidden code of brotherhood, a way of life that mixed ancient Chinese traditions with the raw survival instincts of a new world. Tonight, we uncover what textbooks never told you. From underground gambling dens to opium houses hidden beneath San Francisco's streets, from love letters smuggled through laundries to royalty to coded tattoos marking loyalty to secret tongues. This isn't just history. It's the buried soul of people who refuse to vanish. Because the story of Chinese immigration to America isn't about arrival. It's about survival. And the truth is far more mysterious than you've ever imagined. In the mid-19th century, a silent tide began to cross the Pacific Ocean. Thousands of Chinese men boarded ships from the southern ports of Canton and Hong Kong, chasing a dream they called Gold Mountain. They imagined California's rivers glittering with fortune. But what they found was something very different: poverty, discrimination, and a shadow world of secrets that history tried to erase. Few people know the truth, because behind every success story of Chinese labor, there lies a darker, hidden side of trafficking, forbidden desires, and exploitation. This is the hidden history of Chinese immigration to America, a story so shocking that it was buried for generations. Let's begin at the source. In the 1800s, China was breaking apart. The Qing Empire was crumbling under the weight of internal rebellion and foreign invasion. The Taiping Rebellion had killed tens of millions. Crops failed, families starved. In the southern provinces, especially Guangdong, people were desperate. Rumors spread that far across the ocean lay a place of golden opportunity, a land where even the poorest could strike it rich. They called it Gamsan, the Gold Mountain. Men began leaving by the thousands. They sold their land, borrowed from relatives, or fell into debt just to afford a ticket. Most were young, unmarried, and poor. They promised their families they'd return wealthy. But few ever did. When the first Chinese ships docked in San Francisco in the late 1840s, the locals watched curiously. By 1852, more than 20,000 Chinese had arrived in California. They worked in gold mines, built railroads, and opened laundries. Yet among those thousands of men, There were almost no women. In the entire state of California, there were barely a few dozen Chinese women. This imbalance created something strange. A bachelor society where men lived in crowded bunkhouses, sent money home, and dreamed of wives they might never see again. And into that emptiness crept an underworld that would soon control the lives of countless women. In southern China, human trafficking was already a quiet business. Poor families sold daughters to pay debts. Brokers promised to send the girls overseas for marriage or work. But once the ships left port, the truth changed. Many of these girls, some as young as 12 or 13, were taken to America and sold into brothels. In San Francisco's Chinatown, this became an open secret. Behind the wooden shutters and hanging lanterns, a hidden empire grew. Brothel owners made fortunes by exploiting young women who had no way to escape. Some were beaten into submission. Others were trapped through addiction, especially to opium, a drug that blurred pain and time, leaving its victims enslaved in both body and mind. The Chinese criminal organizations known as Tongs saw opportunity. They took control of gambling dens, opium houses, and brothels. They bought and sold women as property, shipped them between cities, and fought brutal wars for dominance. These battles were known as the Tong Wars, bloody street fights and assassinations that stained the alleys of Chinatown. But here's the shocking part. While the Chinese underworld thrived, American lawmakers turned a blind eye until they realized they could use these very crimes as justification to stop Chinese immigration altogether. In 1875, the U.S. government passed the Page Act, the first federal immigration law in American history. On paper, it was designed to stop the importation of immoral women. In practice, it targeted Chinese women specifically. Every woman traveling from China had to prove she was not a prostitute, an almost impossible task. As a result, even honest wives and daughters were denied entry. This meant Chinese men in America were trapped in a cruel paradox. They could not bring their wives, and they could not form families. The community was frozen. Thousands of lonely men, and only a handful of women, many of them enslaved in brothels. What happened inside those brothels is the part of history no one liked to record. Girls were auctioned in hidden rooms, sold to the highest bidder, and locked away. Some were forced to take opium before serving clients. Others were told that escape would mean death. It said that in the 1870s, nearly 70% of all Chinese women in San Francisco were working as prostitutes. Many didn't even know what country they were in. For the men who visited, it was escape from loneliness. For the women, it was a living nightmare. And yet, this entire system operated under the city's nose, sometimes with police protection, sometimes under politicians who profited from the bribes. When authorities finally decided to act, it wasn't out of compassion. It was because Chinatown's image as a den of sin fed the growing fear and racism sweeping across America. White laborers accused the Chinese of stealing jobs, bringing disease, and corrupting morals. Politicians saw opportunity in that fear. They painted Chinese immigrants as a plague, dirty, immoral, and dangerous. This hysteria led to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, the first law in American history to ban an entire nationality. For the next 60 years, Chinese immigration was almost completely stopped. Families were torn apart. Husbands in America couldn't bring wives from China. Wives in China couldn't join their husbands. Generations lived in separation. But even exclusion couldn't erase the underground networks. Smugglers found new ways to bring people in through Mexico, Canada, or forged papers. Some women entered as so-called paper daughters, claiming false family connections. Once inside the country, many vanished into domestic service or prostitution, hidden behind fake identities. The American public loved scandal stories about Chinatown. Newspapers described secret tunnels, opium dens filled with smoke, and lewd Oriental women corrupting white men. Most of it was sensationalized, but it kept the myth alive. The truth was far more tragic. These women were not temptresses, they were victims of poverty, racism, and greed. They had no legal rights. If they were beaten or raped, they couldn't go to the police. In court, their testimony was often worthless simply because they were Chinese. But not everyone stayed silent. Some missionaries and reformers began to fight back. One of the most famous was Donaldina Cameron, a Scottish-American woman who ran a mission in San Francisco. She and her team risked their lives to raid brothels, rescue women, and hide them from traffickers. The Tongs threatened to kill her. They called her the angry angel of Chinatown. Yet she didn't stop. Many of the women she rescued went on to live new lives, free but forever scarred. Even within the Chinese community, there were deep conflicts. The powerful Six Companies, the official Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, tried to stop the trafficking. But the criminal Tongs were often beyond their control. Respectable Chinese merchants wanted acceptance in American society, while the underworld thrived on secrecy and vice. Meanwhile, the stories of the women faded into silence. Many died young. Others disappeared under false names. Their graves, if they had any, were unmarked. For decades, this part of history was buried. When Americans talked about Chinese immigration, they spoke of railroad workers, laundries, and labor. The women were forgotten, but history leaves traces. Old court documents, missionary diaries, and city maps still whisper the truth. In the archives of San Francisco, there exists a map from 1885 marking every brothel, every gambling den, every opium house in Chinatown. The city called it a map of vice, but for historians, it's a map of suffering. Some of those buildings still stand today. Renovations have uncovered sealed rooms, hidden staircases, and trapdoors leading to nowhere. Physical ghosts of the secret world beneath Chinatown. And beyond the architecture, there are the whispers, stories passed down through families, sometimes spoken in shame, sometimes in grief. A grandmother who came to work in a sewing shop but never spoke of her early years. A photograph of a woman with no name found in an attic, a letter written in broken English, pleading for help. The deeper you look, the more the past begins to stir. The impact of this hidden history still echoes, because those lonely men, unable to bring wives, created generations of isolation. Many Chinese immigrants died alone. Some returned to China after decades, strangers to their own families. Others stayed and built small businesses, laundries, groceries, restaurants, trying to build respect in a country that called them unwanted. When the exclusion laws finally ended in 1943, only a few thousand Chinese women had ever been allowed into the United States. Imagine that: nearly a century of immigration and almost no families. But the story doesn't end in tragedy. It ends in remembrance. In recent years, descendants of those early immigrants have begun to uncover the truth. They've dug into archives, traced family trees, and found evidence of forgotten women whose names never appeared in history books. Museums and documentaries have started to tell their stories, not as victims, but as survivors of one of the most brutal systems of exploitation in American history. And that's the final twist, the most shocking truth of all. The women who were once trafficked and enslaved became the invisible mothers of generations of Chinese Americans today. Their blood runs through the veins of people who may never know their names. When you walk through Chinatown today, with its lanterns, music, and street markets, it's easy to see only the color and culture. But under those bright lights lies a deeper layer, a buried memory of pain, endurance, and silence. History often celebrates the winners, but the real test of humanity is how we remember the lost. The Chinese immigrants who built railroads and towns deserve credit. But the women who suffered in secret, they deserve remembrance. Because their story is not just Chinese history. It's American history. It's a story of how dreams turn to nightmares when greed and prejudice take over. So the next time someone mentions the gold rush or the railroads, remember that behind every shining piece of gold, there was a price paid in human lives. This was the hidden world, a world built on loneliness, desire, and deception, a world that shaped the very foundation of America's immigration laws. And though time has buried the names of many, their voices still echo. They remind us that freedom is fragile, that opportunity without compassion becomes cruelty, and that the truest form of justice is memory. Because when we remember, they are no longer forgotten. And that is the real hidden history of Chinese immigration to America.